You're listening to Your Rivers Are Wrong, the podcast. My name is Merle. I'm here with my good friend Dante, and we're here to build worlds and tell their stories. So sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Good morning, or evening, or afternoon. Whenever you may be, welcome back to the Your Rivers Are Wrong podcast. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Dante.
And I'm the other host, and my name is Merle.
And we're here, as we are every week, to talk about the wonderful whimsies of world building, the arts and aesthetics of setting up a setting and telling stories born from it.
Yes.
We're back at it.
Mm-hmm.
One more week.
One more week. Well, I mean, many more weeks, hopefully.
Yes.
But yes.
One more week in a list of many, of course. You know what's crazy is that...
What's crazy?
Yeah, I feel like I've gotten kind of comfortable with my setup, right? Which is headphones, this mic in front of me with this dangly arm. But I was over the weekend on a Zoom call, right?
Uh-huh.
And I pull up my webcam. I don't usually use a webcam at all.
Sure.
I set it up on top of my screen and I turn it on and I look at everybody else's camera and they're just kind of staring at their laptop. And that's totally fine and cool. But then here comes me, right? I have the whole very large headphone set. I have a professional mic in front of me and I'm like, oh, this is not everybody.
Did you have the gamer background lighting in the background?
Oh, not the gamer background. No, I don't.
Then you would be 100%, 10 out of 10.
Yeah, but I got the whole computer swivel chair when everybody else is just on their couch, and I'm like, oh wait, I should.
Was it a fun chill Zoom or was it a work Zoom?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, okay.
With friends.
Yeah, then you came overqualified.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I need some Shure SM7B quality for just a regular call. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that kind of caught me off guard.
But I also do that. I guess I just don't want to go through the hassle if nobody cares. I have a very good mic, but I just don't use it for Zoom shit because I'm but literally no one else will care.
That's true. The most prep I had to do was actually just clean the background of my camera. Clean the right side of my room so nobody sees all the messy stuff on the left.
The endless Zoom struggles. Yep.
Absolutely.
We've all been there. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Anything happened with you this week? What's up with you?
I have a new obsession.
Go for it.
As we've established, I think, during our pirate episode, I'm very good at obsessing over a certain thing that I find awesome, right? I can't do the 50% nice and watching, an episode a day. I just can't. I'm not built for that. I've accepted this of myself.
Sure. Well, I need to know what this is. So
well, unfortunately, it's Dutch. So there's a bit of a, how do you say that? A hurdle for you.
Listen, where there's subs, there's a way.
Fair enough. No, this is an older TV program. The last installment was a 2018.
Okay. That's not old.
Yeah, but I think it started at 2006 or something. They have a lot of seasons, apparently. I have no idea what this was.
Is this Dutch Degrassi?
No, it's not. It's actually not even fiction. It's just a sort of program, a setting. They're in a theater. And they just invited A-list actors just for they have 20 or something A-list actors in the audience aside from the usual I guess regular audience, and they just do improv all the time. And it's
oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, they just constantly single out two actors. They're going to be okay, Stefan and Anne, you're going to do this next scene. And then they just give them a prompt. It's literally theater class, which is maybe why I love it so much. And then they just give them a prompt, kind of what we are doing, but then more, a bit more in the theater vibe. So they're just saying, okay, you are a happily married couple, and then suddenly you realize that Steven is ill or something, or he just got, some kind of prompt like that. And then they just riff off of it for 10 minutes or something because they're awesome. It's always amazing. And it's so satisfying to watch. I feel I think something instigated that I know what it was. I watched EXU Calamity thing from Critical Role, the new miniseries.
Which is amazing, by the way.
And the end of season 2 was, I got wild theater vibes. And I was I need theater in my life now. There's not enough of this. So as I do with obsessions, I just watch everything that's closely related and then it works. And then so I found this Dutch series and it's super good and they have so many seasons and I've watched so much of it that I forget to sleep, which is how I work. And it's not practical.
Okay.
But it's super awesome.
Wait. We got to break this down.
Okay,
when did you start watching?
I think the last 2 nights I have not been in bed at proper
Hello?
times.
So it's been 2 nights.
Uh-huh.
How many hours have you watched?
This is like every episode I
Maybe.
feel. I mean, enough. Let's put it there. Like at least multiple seasons of this. Also,
Multiple
they have
seasons?
a junior version. They have a
It's been
junior
2
version
days.
with kids that are also amazing. It's a problem, Dante.
Oh no.
It's a problem.
Okay. What's the name of it for the people? I believe
Oh.
a strong 12 to 15% of our audience is from Netherlands, so that's awesome.
Hey,
First of all.
represent. Yeah, that's true.
For them, what's
It's
the name of
called
this series?
De Vloer Op, which basically means the stage is yours, kind of like entering the floor. It's literally, I think, the
Oh, cool.
translation. But it's kind of like the stage is yours vibes. Yeah, it's awesome. I wish I wasn't obsessing over things the way I do, but I do. So I just gotta get through this, right? And then I finish this whole fucking thing, and then I can do normal things again.
That's
But it's
valid.
really cool. So that's been the last 2.5 or something days for me. How about you? What have you been doing?
I watched a movie about dinosaurs, I guess.
Beautiful. That's a good start.
What is it? Dinosaur. Jurassic World
World? Oh, yeah.
Dominion, I think, is the new one. My friend invited me, and maybe we could talk about this later in the podcast. But
Sure.
I don't follow the storyline. I guess I thought there were 2 movies before this. Apparently, there's 6. I thought there
what?
was 6 in total.
Oh,
so
I thought so too.
I was totally out of the blue. I was missing a lot of context. But
Best way to watch a movie. I mean, not
but
gonna
to
lie.
put it very, very succinctly, it hit all the dopamine receptors of my lizard brain. As in, you know how I was ranting about dragons last episode?
Oh, I understand this now.
It turns out dinosaurs hit that same nerve, that same neuron.
Right.
So when I see them on screen, I'm like, yeah, dinosaurs.
They're almost
I was
like dragons.
True 8-year-old fashion. Whenever they showed up, I was like, yes, go, go, go. It was so great. And
That's beautiful. I'm so happy for you.
was I profoundly inspired by philosophical ideals of the movie? Absolutely not.
Mm-hmm. That's not why you go there. No, of course.
Yeah, was it a coherent, solid plot line? Not really. Not really, but were there a lot of dinosaurs? There
Yes.
sure were.
Fucking yes.
It was again and again. I was like, yes, let's go, yes.
I mean,
cheering
what
for all
is the other
dinosaurs.
reason that you watch Jurassic Park or Jurassic World movies anyway? You come for the dinosaurs. Nobody's gonna deny that. It's like the Cars movie. You come for the cars, and it's literally called Cars. That's the whole point of it.
Exactly. Yeah, but Cars has a decent plot line.
Cars is actually
smooth
also
it
good,
over.
which is great, but it didn't have to be.
Actually pretty solid.
If it was just Cars and a crappy movie, people would still come because it's Cars.
Yeah. Yeah, Jurassic World felt a lot like that. It was 10 minutes of plot line and
A lot
an
of
hour and a half
dinosaurs.
of showing you people running from dinosaurs.
Yeah,
and that
fucking
was
awesome.
truly all I needed. I didn't realize that was what I wanted to watch, but it was. And I was enthralled. I'm like, this movie is so bad.
Right.
Not so bad. It's actually decent. But these parts are so good.
I mean, you had a good time. It sounds like you had a great time. Yeah.
Yeah, I was I think I was having more fun than the kids in the theater. It was very, very fun.
This is the way that I talk to my brother about Star Wars. He has watched all of the movies and I have literally no context whatsoever. I think I started one book of it. I don't even know why I started with a book of all things in Star Wars in the universe, right? That's kind of dumb, but sure. And then after 20 pages, I was kind of eh.
When I think Star Wars, I think of the novel series. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right. That's where you start. And then I didn't finish it. So I'm sort of constantly mellowly interested in this. But he's if you want to watch a movie, just go for the spaceships and go for the 4-year-old feeling of pew, 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 fighting in space.
That's right.
And then
That's
you have a
right.
great time.
He's
It's like the
right.
dinosaurs. Just go for the dinosaurs and you'll have the time of your life. It's perfect.
Yeah,
I love that for you.
it hit the same nerves as the Expendables movies, where they just grab 12 or 13 action hero stars and throw them all into the same movie, but a sprinkle, a smidgen of plot, right? And then just send them on their way to blow things
Sort of,
up and ride
yeah.
cool bikes and crash cars. And it's just we're here for that.
Let's go.
2 hours of that,
Yeah.
truly just watching them do things.
Some movies just have that where you just go for the 8-year-old in yourself. Like the Mad Max movies where it's just fucking Western cowboys in the future. Let's go. Motorcycles, motorcycle wars, everything's in the desert.
Listen,
yes.
yeah.
And all the rest I don't really care about anyway.
Like, I didn't come here for
Good thing.
intrigue. You think I'm watching Expendables for intrigue? No.
I don't need
here for the
intrigue.
guns.
Yeah.
I'm here for the cars. I'm here for the cool catchphrases they said 15 years ago. That's why I'm here.
That's perfect.
So I'm glad we both had very productive, thrilling weekends, as you guys have heard. Thank you for joining us, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Are you still here?
Last thing before we continue on, I guess this intro is kind of long, but last thing before we continue on, we got some fan mail this week, which was exciting.
Oh, yeah, we did get some fan mail.
Yeah.
It was from my favorite human in the world.
Your favorite human in the world. Thank you, Sherry, for sending us that. Sherry,
I think, yeah.
Sherry, great. Thank you for that email. That was wonderful. We'll get to what you're talking about eventually. It might not be today, but we will.
It's on the list, baby.
A very, very fun email. We also got another email from Doug. Shout out to Doug. Cool prompt. I'll save that for a rainy day. But with that said, let's jump into, like I'm about to start a campaign series. Let's jump into our first
It's the year
prompt.
2004. No.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, keep going.
That one Dutch improv show is just starting.
What?
Everybody zoom back as we flash back in time. Okay, anyway, my topic this week, as promised from last week, if you watched episode 22, which you can check out at Your Rivers Are Wrong on Pod Anchor. What is our URL? Do we have a URL for this podcast? Gosh,
just look.
Wait. I don't know. Are you?
Hold on. Backtrack a second.
What is our? Do we have a URL?
You could just say like find it on Spotify.
Yeah,
the point is that it's everywhere.
Find on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Castbox, Google Podcasts, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, Spotify, Stitcher.
Okay.
And 2, 3, 4 other platforms. I made very sure that you guys could listen to this, so please listen to this. But our main address is anchor.fm/YRAW -podcast. That's us. Anyway. As on episode 22, as I reposition myself, I said that this would be our topic because last week was dragons, so this week has to be the first D&D, which is dungeons. We're going to talk about dungeons today.
Awesome. Let's go.
Very, very fun. Dungeons. I looked into the origin of the word because that's what I like to do with this kind of stuff. Turns out, and I didn't know this, dungeons back in Old English vernacular usually only refer to the lower levels of like castles and keeps and stuff like that, right? You know, throw them in the dungeon, all right. It refers to like prisons.
Yeah.
Specifically in large buildings like castles. But in very specifically role-playing games, like tabletop role-playing games, dungeons has grown to encapsulate any subterranean region, which is caverns, which is long tunnels. Like those have been classified as dungeons as well, which is very, very interesting. Dungeons, of course, in the famous Dungeons and Dragons is a mainstay and almost a foundation to the RPG as a whole, which is what wargaming, tabletop fantasy gaming has kind of evolved into, this strange exploration of these uncharted territories, slowly pathing yourselves through these mysterious caverns and tunnels and discovering lots of things inside, whether it be treasure or people or a great artifact that you're looking for. Dungeons have become a mainstay in this genre and have expanded outwards into various other forms of media, which is very, very interesting to me. When I was looking up this topic, I tried to find things that I was familiar with in terms of like what dungeons are, what they represent. And hopefully with this topic, I kind of want to break down like what makes a good dungeon. You know, what makes an interesting, intriguing dungeon? Why do people use it? And what is its purpose in terms of molding it into a part of whatever story you're trying to unfold?
Right.
So for me, at least, the biggest influences for me when I see dungeons, I've seen it in like books and stuff. Like I've read a couple books where they generate into like large, deep caverns and all that stuff. But a lot of dungeoning is the visual, like seeing it or imagining it or like watching people traverse through it. It's a very like eyes open experience, I'd like to believe, right?
What does that mean? Eyes opening experience in terms of like the environment, that it's just as a nature thing.
Exactly.
Super cool to traverse through.
It's very much a five senses sort of experience.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So like unlike, you know, abstract like ideas and motifs that are in books and movies, dungeons is a setting, right? It's a place. And there are the five senses that you tap into for like sight. Very specifically, if you think of dungeons, you think of darkness. You think of blank walls, like rocky, weathered and worn. You can see like kind of water dripping from the ceiling. You're immediately hit, if you're hitting the other five senses, with like the smell, like the odor of earth, of something not tended to or kept clean. It's something allowed to return to the very chaos that is like nature. It's not exactly predictable. Thinking of like sounds, specifically in dungeons, it's the sonorous surroundings. You can hear echoings from deep within, possibly foreshadowing what you will find. Foreshadowings of the creatures around you. You can hear the skittering or the movement in the far distance. It's very much a sound, not sight sort of situation where, unlike other settings, you really have to pay attention to what you hear. And traveling quietly and all those things is something that greatly behooves you or benefits you, right? And of course, touch is another sense you use when you can't rely on sight. You have to kind of feel your way around, interact with these foreign elements that you're probably not used to. I think one of the big keystones of dungeons is that it's not somewhere you're comfortable, right? It's not it's not somewhere you hang out or interact with often.
Yeah, that's interesting because I feel like in terms of purely the sort of sensory experience of going through a dungeon is also very alienating because it doesn't really look like things we're used to traveling to.
Of course.
There's no grass, there's no wind, there's no light. That's all kind of, but it's still a space. And it can cover like a lot of, miles. There's like deep cavern systems and stuff that's often what a dungeon is, basically. And I think also the other relevant part, if I'm breaking in here anyway.
Yeah, of course.
Is the thing that we talked about a little bit very early on in our podcast, I think, like maybe episode 3 or something, where it's about confined spaces. Because
Small
I think
spaces,
dungeons,
right.
It's kind of literally a crawl space under the earth, right? It feels sort of, in a sort of practical sense, if we're going to talk about that, it's very nice and useful to have rooms that you can't go out of that just has an entrance and an exit, and that's it. In terms of storytelling and, fighting monsters, or, you can literally lead a party through a number of chambers one by one because that's just how the caverns connect, right? And in an open world, in like a big grassy field, or in, there's multiple cities on this map, I guess, you can go anywhere if you wanted to because it's open like that. And I think dungeons, specifically in the earlier stages of D&D, have that quality that make it logical to traverse something step by step, like both the story step by step, but also like first you come in a chamber and you can't continue unless you figure this secret door out, right? So it's a very logical sort of order of events that you can use in your story that makes it perfect for, TTRPGs and stuff. Yeah, and aside from that,
absolutely.
The whole alienating experience is just a very cool visual, and I think very awesome because monsters like the one that we have in D&D very often, or classically, I should say, are all kind of weird, and they're not really like animals. Some are, but a lot of them really aren't. So it makes sense to put them in a sort of alienating space, or, it's like as if you would traverse under seas, right? That's also the same sort of interesting, weird, alienating sort of landscape. I think that works a lot of wonders for, your sense of the world in general.
Yeah, of course. Gosh, there's so many things to touch on there. I absolutely love that point where you say it's kind of a confined space for a purpose, right? So when when you're running a campaign for your friends in D&D, right, and you open up this great map for them, dungeons, and not only being this very interactive, stimulating experience, is also a fantastic way to kind of condense the story and facilitate your preparation, because you can pack the dungeon full of a whole lot of things you really enjoy or would like them to see, and you can make sure that they see it. Like none of your prep is wasted when you break down a dungeon, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You can always cater it perfectly to the people who are experiencing it. It's a fantastic way to make sure that they're having a great time every minute along the way, instead of like wandering around aimlessly and things like that.
Yeah.
Another thing you mentioned was like grass, wind, light as things that are foreign to dungeons. And that's kind of so great because we're so used to those things just always being around us, that if they're found in a dungeon, it almost always means something, right? Grass could mean a place where things can grow without trouble. Right. Wind could be an exit, Yeah. Wind always leads to, it always comes from cavern openings.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Right. And of course, light as well. Light at the end of the tunnel. It's an escape.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, those elements that we take for granted in other settings, we can use purposefully in dungeons to signal places of safety, of quiet, of peace, of refuge, Yeah,
or the other way around. It immediately reminded me also of that one moment in Critical Role Campaign 2, mild spoilers, where they went to I think it was called the
really long
Temple of the
dungeon?
False Serpent.
Mhm.
Well, that one too. But this one specifically because at some point it's an underground thing. So they traverse sort of deeper and deeper into this tunnel and they lower a level every time. And in one level, there was this sort of forest with like trees that they didn't know, but it was definitely like a small patch of, trees and bushes and stuff. But
Right.
because it was underground and in this weird temple, it was super weird to sort of come across that. It wasn't natural at all. So the first time they see these trees, they're like, what? What's going on here? Because it doesn't fit, right? It doesn't,
Right.
even though the idea of a forest is the most, natural thing and the most basic idea of, basic nature that you travel through. If it's in an underground space or in a sort of confined space like that, it's very weird and eerie. So you can also definitely use the fact that a dungeon or a sort of underground system or setting is kind of that naturally alienating space. If you put something almost like ultra normal in there, it's also going to be interesting because it doesn't fit, because it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the other side of the coin, I guess, in comparison to what you were describing earlier.
Right. And I think that kind of brings us to the point of why dungeons are used, right? So dungeons have a very specific energy to them. They have a very specific like aesthetic and something they bring to the table that you can't really find in other spots quite as readily. Dungeons are almost always associated with danger. They're almost always associated with somewhere that is uncomfortable, that is challenging, and that is, as we said, dangerous. Things are unpredictable. Darkness is prevalent. The air of mystery and fear and anxiety, all of those kind of culminate into this small confined space where the characters inside are always focused on, one, whatever they're trying to find, and two, escaping safely.
Yeah.
So those two things, if you're looking to add that to any story that you're writing or looking for a place to keep your very precious artifacts or the prisoners that went missing 3 days ago, this is something that you could absolutely use to do that. It's just like dragons in that there's something that's immediately evoked when you think about it.
Yeah, for sure. And I also like, because it's such a weird environment to be in, and sort of unnatural environment to, traverse through, I guess, that it really feels like we are the strangers in a world that's not ours. I really also love that trope.
Absolutely.
That's also why I love undersea stuff. It's kind of you're in another planet and we don't know the culture of this place or the sort of vibe of this place, right? So when we see a monster or when we see traces on the ground or whatever, we don't know what it means because we're not versed in the sort of alienness of this space. And I think that's really awesome because that brings also that sense of danger and the sense of, I don't know if this is just me not knowing about this or if this is actually super dangerous or like relevant. And that brings also a lot of figurative darkness unknown to it.
Right. And what's so fantastic about dungeons is that they exist as defined by role-playing games and expanded to greater media. They exist anywhere, right? As long as your setting is above ground, dungeons can truly be as close or as far as you want them to be.
Yeah,
you don't have to carve out a space in your world to fit dungeons. It can truly be just around the corner.
Yeah.
It's incredibly economical in space,
That's very true.
Really fitting like the modern century architecture. Doesn't waste space at all. You can place them anywhere.
Yeah.
Which is what makes them so fantastic. Yeah. One of my favorite tropes when it comes to dungeons and why I guess it's found so much success in tabletop role-playing games is that one feeling, and I wish I want to describe it as perfectly as I can, where your character or the person you are watching or witnessing is placed in the center of a dark map and you have to choose a direction. And as you travel, this map slowly fleshes out and fills in as you break kind of the fog of war it's described.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And slowly fill out what's been lacking. And the feeling of accomplishment when you've mapped out an entire dungeon, when you've turned all the stones and all the dark corners are revealed to you and explored, the feeling of satisfaction of completing that. Like I've been on maps where it's like, hey, look, there's the exit. All right, let's head back in and check that last corner that I missed.
Yeah.
Really want to see what that is.
It's the sense of completion. Yeah, for sure. I feel that. Yeah.
There's a manga that I've been very much enjoying. I think it just has an anime now, and it goes by I'm gonna murder this pronunciation. Kumo desu ga nanika, which means so I'm a spider, so what?
There will never not be a time where I wish all titles were like anime titles. That's awesome.
It's major cells. The major cell is that one, it's like we talked about last week, like an isekai setting Was it last week we talked about an isekai setting where you're transported to
so.
another world and you kind of like explore it?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we talked about that. Basically, the main character was transported from another world. They were just a regular girl, kid, person, I guess. But they are transformed into the body of a spider living in a giant unexplored dungeon. And they have to survive and traverse it and escape. And they're the funniest character. They're super duper funny because they're using all this real world logic to this dungeon and panicking at every turn when things don't make sense.
I love that.
And like the cavern slowly opens up and they make a home and they gather materials from the other side and they learn about the other creatures in the dungeon. And it slowly was once like scary and intimidating.
Yeah.
It's very fun.
Oh, cool.
What was once like scary and terrifying, they're slowly like carving out their place within the system. To eventually leave it, of course, but you start noticing that they know where they're going. They understand the tunnels, and it's very, very fun to read. That'd be my recommendation for this podcast. But Dungeons in particular, breaking that air of mystery and tapping into the aspects of curiosity once you overcome that is one of my favorite little turns of story or my favorite little twists of emotion when using them in your settings and all that.
That's super fun. If I may add another dungeon-related recommendation to this.
Of course.
The Nintendo Switch indie game called Eastward, and I think it's from the same people as Chucklefish as well, which is, I think, related to the Stardew Valley ones. It's super cute. I haven't finished it because I haven't found time to be obsessed over more things that I already am. But it's very cute. The character art is amazing. It's like pixely, but in a very cinematic way. And there's a lot of really cool dungeons and sort of related game mechanics that are super fun to play. Honestly, for me, I mean, we're not doing this podcast for nothing. I love story first and foremost. So game mechanics aren't going to rock my boat unless it's like really fun. But this one has like a lot of both story and character development and game mechanics. And That's the great. Feel of like dungeon exploring very much because you see a lot of cities and you go underground or in specific like catacombs or stuff like that. That one's really cool too.
Great. All right. I think that's all I had to say on the topic.
Yeah, cool.
I'm happy we've covered both Dungeons and Dragons now.
Yeah, I feel, we should have established that earlier, but I'm glad we did it.
Yeah, tune in next week where I cover the ampersand and the history behind it.
Nice.
Very, very exciting. Anyway, we're going to jump over to your topic, I believe.
Yeah, which is also a given already because we talked about this last time.
Spoilers.
It's in the title probably as this is uploaded.
Oh, that's true. They click on this video.
I feel like we say this all the time. And then lately I realized, wait, we're spoiling it anyway in our title, so it doesn't matter. So you've seen this already, but I'm going to talk about trequels now, as we promised last week. Trequels for the uninitiated.
What are trequels?
I was just going to explain, Dante. Thanks for asking this relevant question to me. Trequels, for the uninitiated, are the third installment of a series or franchise of either movies or books or anything. Basically, the third book, the third movie, you name it. So hear me out. The interesting thing about trequels.
Great start. Great start.
Aren't you engaged?
I'm ready. I'm so
I know,
invested.
right? Yeah, perfect. The interesting thing about trequels is that they have to not only be better than the first book, or installment, I should maybe call them, but also better than the second book. They need to like add on two works that have already have a sort of weird dynamic to them. I was thinking like, what's the difference between a sequel and a trequel? Interestingly, sequels have the very well-known history to them that they're often bad. And often nobody really likes them. My favorite example of this is the Disney movie Pocahontas. That is, for me, a very, very good Disney movie. Also nostalgia, but also I really love this movie. That famously has one of the worst sequels I've ever seen.
Yes.
That I cried over because it's so bad.
Yes.
It's awful. The characters don't match up. The animation's weird. The settings, like, not interesting at all.
Right.
Everyone's kind of not in the right place. Nobody's really happy. The ending is awful.
Right, it is.
Spoilers, I guess, but I mean, don't watch this movie. Don't indulge in this. You're better off watching something else.
Right.
So, sequels have the name to be very hard to deliver after a very good first installment. With, I guess, the exception of things like trilogies or duologies, which is also a thing. Trilogies specifically, I think, are quite famous in like coming of age or in kind of young adult novels. We've all heard of the Hunger Games ones, the Harry Potter ones that had like 7, 8 installments. I think what's interesting about trilogies, which is 3 parts of a series, is that they work following a specific structure, right? And that's kind of the way they sort of build on top of each other, if done right, of course. The way they expand on the first installment, second installment, etc., is why they work. And the thing about sequels is very easily or very often a sequel gets made in sort of the business end of it all, right?
Right.
If the first movie is awesome and was like a box office hit and brought in a lot of money, the thing you can do and why a sequel is so efficient is you basically don't need to hire story writers, anything that's kind of about the content, because you already have that from the first movie. You can just sort of lift it over and lift on the momentum of the first movie. And it has already a sort of name recognizability to it because people love the first movie.
Yeah.
So why a lot of sequels are being made and are very bad is because of this reason. Like, it's easy to lift off of the name and the sort of status, I guess, of the first installment, but actually that makes a very bad movie because they don't invest in anything that should be invested in.
Right.
In terms of story or plot or development or whatever. So I think the interesting thing about this is that for me, the sequels and trequels that have worked are the ones that either expand on the system or the, world that's established in the first installment, or they completely shatter it and we have to start from the ground up. And I think those two things, I don't know, if I think about the Hunger Games, for instance, let's take that one. In the first book, we've established this sort of system, right? The system of the Hunger Games. This is how this society works. They put children in the Hunger Games and they kill each other off until one remains. And that's their entertainment. And it's very shifted.
Yeah.
In the second book, spoilers, I guess, we use the same system, but because the world is developing and sort of establishing and cracking, I guess, a little bit more politically and, in terms of diplomatic tensions, etc.
Right.
The system that's used, that's lifted off from the first series, is expanded on and feels denser than the other one because suddenly there's other kind of stakes involved in this now, even though the system is kind of the same. Another installment of the Hunger Games is in the second book, and she's going through the Hunger Games again. But because the stakes feel different and the world feels larger and more complex and more difficult, I guess, more tense, the Hunger Games are more tense and the games mean something else. And we see that in the third installment too, where there's still, the world gets larger and larger and Katniss, the main character, kind of gets wrapped up in this sort of political intrigue, tense situation, right? She suddenly has this role of, I guess, being a savior, being the face of the rebellion, etc., etc. But because she needs to infiltrate the main capital, the main city, another kind of layer of this system is added into this book. I think at some point, one of the side characters says to Katniss as they are kind of preparing to infiltrate the city, he's saying like, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the latest Hunger Games. It's not the games anymore, but it's still the same system of, infiltrating, killing everyone until, you get to your goal. But the whole feel of it is super weird and shifted and wrong, right? And politically charged. And that's very interesting. So that's, I think, a good example of sort of expanding and densening, I guess. I don't know if that's a word, but it feels like a word.
It should be a word.
Densening your story and your setting by adding onto it in sequels and trequels. And having the same feel to the book because we use the same system makes it a cohesive thing, but because the system means something else or is charged with something else, the stakes are increasing in every installment. And that's a very delicate balance to do properly. So that's very cool. Specifically with trequels, that I'm going to throw it to you because I've been talking for a while.
No, listen, you could continue the whole episode. I don't mind at all.
I feel like this needs a bit of basis because trequels are so specific.
I don't mind at all, yeah.
Specifically with trequels, the other thing is that aside from like shattering your system or expanding on your system, is a change in form that you can do. So there's this one very awesome, I think Australian ? Children's book series that's called Stella Street by Elizabeth Honey. Again, I love this too because of nostalgia. I read the Dutch ones when I was, the proper age group. And I really, really love them and I still do. But this is 4 books in total and every book has a very different system. The things that are the same throughout this book is the club of kids that are sort of the main characters. It's kind of this group of kids that are in the same neighborhood and they have a very nice, healthy relationship, very close to each other. The setting constantly changes. Like one is in their street where they get new neighbors that are very weird. Another installment is where they, as a group of people, including some of their parents and stuff, have a holiday. The third book is one where someone new gets added to the group and the main character really doesn't like her because she's so different from her. So she has to find out how these new group dynamics work. And the fourth book is a very different structure in terms of the main character just writes letters to one person that she met, and it's still about this group of people, but it's a very different format. So these all feel very different to each other because the form changes and because the book kind of grows and zooms in on different aspects. I do think it's a very good example of how a trequel can work properly because it enlightens other aspects of the series or of the story, I should say, that weren't dealt with in the first installments.
Right.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways you can go about this, but maybe to toss it over to you.
Of course.
Have you had specific trequels or maybe sequels, to expand it a little bit, that stayed with you because they were either very good or very bad?
Oh, gosh. Yeah. There's so much to comment on. Thank you for that. Before I jump into that, I really want to tap into, like what you said, basically. What leads to the success of threequels and trilogies as a whole is intent, right? When the first installment is made, is the story intended to continue to 3 parts or is it intended to conclude? And that often dictates how successful the next 2 installments will be. A pretty simple example is Rush Hour. The movie Rush Hour with Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker was fantastic. It was like a buddy cop film and all that. And famously, Rush Hour 2, I believe many people agree, was a better movie. The Rush Hour 2 actually had the characters established already. They got over the introductions, the weird culture shock of them both interacting with each other's lifestyles, and they were finally able to tap into the comedic duo that they can exemplify in this fantastic action thriller, right?
Yeah.
Fantastic sequel, great start, great premise of the foundation of Rush Hour 1 leading into Rush Hour 2. Now, Rush Hour 3, not fantastic. Okay. Not fantastic.
No.
I think at the end of Rush Hour 2, you kind of realize that these two teammates have kind of reached the pinnacle of their partnership, like truly harmonious in whatever they do. Well, even though they clash in terms of cultural differences, they're truly like a well-built,
well-oiled team. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And Rush Hour 3 felt entirely unnecessary. We did not need a third movie on top of that.
So what is Rush Hour 3? Is it just they're also doing more cool things?
Yeah, they're doing more
specifically
cool
changed.
Things.
Oh, okay. It's kind of more of the same.
I want to say that there are some tie-ins to the original villains, but not strongly enough that it was necessary, I guess. All the plot lines had already been tied up. They go to Rush Hour 3, simply they go to France, fantastic setting. The jokes don't land quite as well. And you could tell that since the first 2 movies were so beloved, the third movie must be a success, right?
Right.
And that's kind of cash grab versus intent.
Big mistake.
Like if you built Rush Hour 2 with the idea that Rush Hour 3 would be made, there were specific questions that you could leave unanswered that would be validated and answered in the third installment. And that's intent, right? When series are made with intent, then you can realize what you said, Hunger Games is a fantastic example. A series like that is made with intent. And I loved how you dove into the Hunger Games in its concept was riveting and exciting. The next movie adds depth to the world. Like you get to expand the world around it and realize what led to the Hunger Games being created. Like, why does this dystopia exist? Well, here's why. And then the third installment brings you back into a real practical world Hunger Games. And it's like, you already know why you're reading this. It's because of this strange battle royale system. But now let's give some gravity to it. Let's put some, the characters now understand what they're going through. They understand the system. So with that in mind, now that they've grown and they've matured, and for better or worse, they've been broken in and reforged, let's throw them back into that environment and see how they fare and watch their expertise play out. That is a very, very good 3-part series.
Yeah, for sure. You know? There's so many development in that too. I think the interesting part about the third installment, like the third book, is that kind of the system becomes the world. Like in the first installment, the game, the Hunger Games, right? The system of the Hunger Games, this kind of game show, is of course horrible and a big deal. And, everybody's watching this and it's stakes and everything. And it stands for a lot, right? The poverty and the sort of power dynamic difference between the capitals and stuff, or the districts and stuff. But it's still a game. And the more we traverse through this story and the further we come, by the time of the third book, the game is unnecessary anymore and the world is the game. And I think that's the wildest, most interesting part of storytelling that I've read in a while. Like, that's still why I love that series so much, because the whole sort of premise of it, the start of the Hunger Games being a game that they made up, right? That the Capitol made up and they're just playing for fun. It's like entertainment. And now the entertainment becomes literally the world. The war is entertainment now, which is such a message.
Yeah. If we find that trilogies or threequels find the most success in book form, very specifically because there's only one author, right? Like they kind of have control over the speed or the arc of the story, how well it progresses, and the development of every character. We see mixed success in movies, of course, because you have to consider cast and crew. You have to consider different directors between each one. If you look at the new trilogy of Star Wars, they had like the directors were entirely different from 1 and 2.
Yeah, they changed, right? Between, Yeah,
and the third movie had to reconcile the differences between those two directing styles and make a conclusive story for that, which was very difficult and not necessarily successful. But a lot of movies, their third installment after 2 very successful ones, you'll see this a lot, very specifically in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The third movie is almost always intended to close the door or kind of put a finish line at the end of this character arc. You know, first movie is discovery. Second movie is trials and adding depth to your role in this strange new world. And the third movie is the fulfillment of your character and kind of cementing yourself as part of a living, breathing world.
Yeah, sure.
You know, like putting your mark down, which I think most movies do very fantastically. And of course, as on topical to Jurassic World Dominion, which we talked about earlier today, which is the third movie in a pair of threequels, which I've realized. The third movie is basically culminating all of the famous actors from the previous movies and throwing them all into one flick to adventure together, which they met with varying degrees of success. But it was very much a gift for the people reading, like for the people watching, like a gift for the fans.
Sure.
It's not necessarily the best conclusion to a series. It doesn't wrap everything neatly into a bow because, of course, when you make the first movie, Jurassic Park, you don't exactly expect it to go on for 5 more movies, right?
Yeah,
They kind of have to build out and build reasons to make more movies. And this one was very, very, very much just fan service. Like, this is a gift to the fans who've been following this series. You get to see all your favorite actors. You get to see all these characters come back.
Yeah, of course.
You get to see the T-Rex. You know, everybody loves the T-Rex. This is for you, right? And while books often have this loftier goal of telling this long arcing story that persists, movies are more touch and go, send it out and hope it works well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's also more prone to like reacting on the way the first installment works or something. Like in a book, I feel like it's more, well, yeah, I don't know if that's true actually, now that I think about it. To me, it always felt like in books, you don't really, if the first installment doesn't work or is not amazingly, surprisingly well received, there's still going to be a second installment and a third installment if you like thought about this before. I feel like it's quite usual, even if a series is not super, super successful.
There's less barriers.
Yeah. And I think with movies, very often, like the sequel only comes if the first movie works. I mean, of course, there's much more money involved in movies because it's so expensive to make, which might, you know, that's a solid reason for not instantly, you know, thinking of like making 3 installments of the same franchise.
Yeah, if the first one busts, obviously, you
don't want to need to make this other movie. Yeah, so I get it too, but because I guess the book business, of it is a bit more fluent in that, I think it's easier for writers or storytellers to sort of take that into account early on, which makes for, you know, very often a more logical arc. Not always, because as the sort of Stella Street example that I gave, like very often if it doesn't have like this main arc that's perfectly, you know, tied up in a bow, as you said, it can still be interesting, but you need to be pretty creative to sort of figure that out halfway during your series.
Right.
I mean, that's also a testimony to the writers if it works well doing it that way, because that's also an awesome way to develop it. But then it's more, I guess, thinking about what else do you want or need from this story to dive deeper.
Yeah.
That's a relevant question to anyone who wants to make a sequel or trequel. Like, is this necessary? Is the story unfinished? Or do we want to shine light on something that we haven't explored before that is interesting enough for like an entire second installment?
Yeah, I think a good example for that is John Wick, surprisingly enough. John Wick is just a series about Keanu Reeves getting really mad and being really good at killing people.
Sure.
He's kind of just an action thriller, right?
Yeah.
But there's these little moats of like world building, like in the middle of it. There's like a hotel that only mercenaries can stay at, and they have a whole different set of like culture and currency.
Oh, okay.
That they
fun.
only mention for like 2 or 3 minutes to they kind of throw it to the side. Like, this is true. This is real. Let's keep going,
Yeah.
And the other 2 movies kind of slowly but surely delve into the backstory and the world that John Wick like was spawned from, what he grew up with. And it still packs into the like mindless action thriller, a see thing, kill thing that everybody loves about this movie and why they're watching it.
Yeah.
But to have kind of sow those seeds and be like, if we ever want to come back to this movie, that is something we can play around with. That is something we can build upon.
Yeah, that's
like,
cool. That's cool.
And I think the biggest thing about trilogies and the attempt of success at them is that they work in a similar 3-act structure that all stories or a lot of stories use, which is like the setup, the introducing, obviously, the confrontation, which is like the big, middle, difficult, challenging part, and then the resolution, which contains the climax and the exposition. To do that 3 times successfully and to have the first movie be an overarching setup, the second movie being an overarching build-up, and the third movie being a conclusion on a mini conclusion inside of it, right? To have
That's
a
hard to
3-part
do.
structure, 3-part structures in a 3-part structure. If you can pull that off, it's a testament to like your writing.
You did
and
something well.
And your world
Yeah,
building. Yeah,
exactly.
Which is
very
why
true.
there's very few very good trilogies. But yeah, anything else to touch on with this? Because that is
awesome.
fantastic.
Yeah, I think that was kind of what I wanted to talk about in this one.
Yeah. I love how this
was.
I love how these were both kind of throwaway topics as a joke last episode. And we're like, wait, we can actually do these. We could probably cover these.
I mean, yeah. Specifically the dungeons one. I feel like we can't leave that out when talking about dragons. Like, that's just rude at that point. Yeah.
My only fault is putting the dragons episode before the dungeons episode. But
yeah. Forever.
I didn't plan my 3-part structure like as properly.
See? Yeah. Should have been a book series instead. Maybe we should write books now instead of podcasts.
We should start actually tune in for episode 24 where we write a book. We write a whole book. Just kidding. Let's not manifest that.
We already manifested the Dungeons and Trequels here. This entire episode has been manifested. So that's enough for this episode.
Yeah. We'll in episode 50 when we're writing whole novels within this hour part setting, we'll bounce back to this episode and be like foreshadowing. See? Foreshadowing.
Yeah. Sowing the seeds.
Sowing the seeds. So to wrap this episode up, we could cover this prompt pretty quickly, I suppose.
Sure. What do you have?
Tying in the 2 topics that we had planned a week in advance. Here's your prompt. Give me a reason for the main characters of whatever this is to enter a dungeon a 3rd time.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it had to be this.
It had to be this.
The one time we could prepare what topics we had before.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay.
Again, I think we do this as the end of our to explain if people haven't the first time you're listening. Obviously, we end every episode with a prompt. We kind of exchange who sends the prompt to the other person. Completely improvised.
Yep.
This is it.
Here we go. Here's one. Okay. I got to think of this for a sec.
Sure.
Why the characters enter a dungeon the 3rd time? It's a good question. This is how every movie director ever should think of whether they actually need to make the threequel.
If only every movie started out with, what if we had to do this 3 times?
Yeah.
What would the movie look like?
Why would we want this? Yeah, that's basically the prompt. Okay. I want in this dungeon, I'm kind of thinking in the ways of like monsters that change the environment, right? So I feel like I kind of want a bit of a like the Face Stealer from Avatar kind of vibes. So this is the monster in Avatar that steals faces from people. And if you want to sort of challenge or talk to this monster, you need to not show emotion at all or he will attack and then you won't get out of there.
Yeah.
I want this dungeon to be a sort of very wide open space. So kind of setting the setting here, right? There's this sort of underground cavern system that ends in a very large open kind of ballroom kind of echoey space with a bit of water trickling down, right? You hear skittering in the side, the classic kind of dungeon feel. And there's a small kind of pool in the middle where the characters, during their first try of clearing this dungeon, they realized as they left or thought they had completed the whole thing that they didn't check in the water. And when they exited again and thought, okay, we looted this stuff, we finished what we need to finish, they realized that in the reflection of the water, something was sort of shifting and shivering.
Sure.
At that point, their pockets were full. They were like, I'm tired. I need to we fought all the shit. We can come back another time. The second time they came in because they were like, okay, did we clear everything? Or was there still something left here that we didn't explore?
Right.
This, I don't know.
Completionist through and through.
Sure, yeah. Is that the reason for the second one? Well, sure, whatever. Second one is we want to do the 100%. So they go back in this large open space, and they touch their hand in the water. And what happens is that their hand sort of comes out translucent and
Ooh.
is in a lot of pain for some reason.
Oh no, that's bad.
It feels like there's a sort of random sickness or something poisoning the water. They're not sure. There's still this sort of weird thing in the periphery of their eyes when they look at like water trickling down a wall or something, or a small kind of waterfall, or drops from like stalactites. Yeah.
Right, that's the one.
Stalactites from the ceiling. Did you hear the processing? And every now and then they see a sort of hand reaching out in that reflection of the water,
Ooh.
but they're not sure what it is. At first, they were very boasty about this, right? They were like, okay, we're going to just complete this. You know, we've done this one time already. I'm sure we can like do this another time. What's possibly going to come haunt us that we haven't checked out yet? So when they want to sort of, you know, put their face in the water, see what's under there, maybe swim under there before they put their hand in, right?
Okay.
They were like, okay, maybe there's something else under there, or this leads to another cavern that we haven't explored yet.
Right.
So they want to sort of enter, and the first or the main character puts their hand in, and their hand comes out like super weird and in pain.
Right.
And they're super horrified. They can kind of hear in their mind as they sort of glance through these reflections in the wall, in the little pool, etc., and now also in their hand. I feel like they subconsciously maybe hear a voice or something that says, this is not your world, right? Sort of get out. Right. This is my space. Yeah. In a much more spooky way that I just did. This is my space. Get out of here.
Very casual ghost.
What if it was like the whiniest monster?
This is my space. You gotta leave.
Yeah, you're in my space. You've already been here. What more do you want?
You gotta go.
Yeah. So I feel like the fact that their hand is kind of almost falling off and being like super weird is a reason to leave and, you know, first cure whatever that was. But the fact is they can't cure it. They don't know what this is. There's something about this that's not entirely poison. It's not entirely like undead or something. It's not like a ghostly thing. So the third installment is they need to confront whatever it is that caused this and ask how to deal with this. There's no other way. And I think that's why they had to enter the third time.
That's totally fair. Yeah.
I think I'm going to leave it at that because this was like, I'm not sure if I'm convinced by my own trilogy here, but we'll go with it.
I love how the heroes clearly did not walk into this dungeon with an itinerary. They were
no, obviously not.
They walked in very casual, like, okay, we explored enough. They leave like, wait, we kind of should have done this. It's like people who go to Disney World, but
they only know what they want after they left. Yeah, for sure. They
only remember what they didn't do, right? So yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it's like a too expansive like theme park. Yeah, that's definitely what it is.
Yeah, and like I love how they leave the cave. They talk to some weird sage, and the sage is like, well, I can't help you if you don't know the source or have a piece of the source. Like, did you bring a sample of the water that turned you into like a ghost?
They're like, no, my hand is dying. What are you thinking about?
Totally forgot that. Oh gosh, we gotta go back in. Like, it's like, come on.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely what it is.
The first movie, there's someone in the crowd who's like, check the water. I didn't check the water. Second movie, no, why are you leaving without the water? Get the water.
That's the whole audience of this movie, basically. This is the target audience for this movie.
People like yelling at the screen.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
there
good.
You go.
That's good. We can work with that.
I'm afraid to finish my sentences. Like, I don't want to know what the ending of this is because then I will probably like conclude my trilogy in the same random way that the other first two books or installments have been so far. So there you go. We leave some mystery.
You have to avoid ending it like prematurely before.
Yeah.
Like, exactly. You can't end your trilogy too early. Leave some room open. Anyway.
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect ending.
Yep.
Thank you guys for listening to the end of our podcast. Again, if you're interested in world building or storytelling,
thanks.
This is a fantastic place to start to just find. If you ever want to just listen to one thing in particular, each of our episodes covers 2 topics in particular that you could use to expand these worlds that you are creating. But as you do, always, always, always remember, your rivers are wrong.
Yeah, they're still wrong. I'm sorry.
Very, very wrong. Sorry. I love how we start apologizing at the end. Anyway, have a good one. Goodbye.
See ya.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Your Rivers Are Wrong.
If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for future episodes that you'd like to hear us cover, feel free to contact us at yourriversarewrong@gmail.com. Our intro and outro music is written by Maarten Schellekens. Thanks for that. And again, thank you so much for listening. We hope to see you at the next one.